Welcome back to the Degree of Footy. My name's Harvey Kennedy and I am your host for today. I'm also joined alongside me by my usual cohort, Murray Chart. We can't be joined by Henry today because he's ditched us, but we are joined by senior lecturer, emphasis on the senior, sorry Neil, and journalist Neil Roberts. How you doing, Neil?
I'm fine, thanks, Harvey. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me on. Is Henry not here because I don't give him very good marks?
Yeah.
I think so. I think that is the reason. In all seriousness.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry to say that.
I understand.
But I'm sure you're used to it with teaching.
Yeah, but
class.
you two obviously get good marks, so that's
exactly.
That means a lot. To have that on the podcast means a lot.
Although I am really offended. You're both lucky that I'm not teaching you this semester, because we invited Niall first and then Chris. I'm third in line.
Well, you see,
make me feel good.
We've got Pete wanting to come on. We've got.
Yeah, but you don't want him on, do you?
He's the one that sorts the guests out, so aim it towards Harvey.
Yeah, throw it on me, mate. Throw it on me.
So Neil, let's get straight into it, and we're going to start off with a little bit of a review on your career. So early on, you're at BBC and you were reporting on Grandstand. I mean, what was that like?
Grandstand was an iconic programme in the broadcast landscape of in UK history. Obviously, it predated social media, predated the web. It was rolling sport and sports news between late morning or lunchtime until after the tea time results came in, so sort of 5:30. So it was brilliant. I was working in a regional newsroom in Kent for the BBC when I got an attachment to go and work for Grandstand and Sunday Grandstand. And I had a great time there. It really honed my sports broadcasting skills. But a bit like you guys, booking in eminent guests on this podcast like Niall Hickman and Chris Hall and myself. You know, I used to have to book people like that, like Seb Coe and David Moyes and others. So it was great. It gave me a great insight into sports TV broadcasting.
Neil, am I right by saying you infiltrated a sex cult?
Isn't it a bit early for that question? We don't know each other well enough, do we? I infiltrated a sex cult. Well, no, I didn't infiltrate the sex cult. I chose not to. That was when I was on the News of the World. That was nothing to do with Grandstand. Grandstand did not ask me to infiltrate a sex cult. No, what happened was I was working for the News of the World, which was my final newspaper job. I worked for 5 years in newspapers, and I ended up on the News of the World. And I did a story one day, or I presented a story one day about John Major, the then Prime Minister. He was the previous Prime Minister. Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister, who got his hair cut by John Major's barber. So the former Prime Minister. So the two Prime Ministers getting their hair cut by the same barber. And I thought, this is a great story. I'm going to go and do a feature with this guy. So I presented it as an idea. And the feature said, great idea. Took it to the editor, who was Phil Hall. And he's like, no, I don't fancy it. I want a story on a sex cult. So they came back to me and said, go and get a story on a sex cult. So I was like, don't really know too many people.
It's a bit of a different story
cult.
to what you're kind of going for.
Well, it was the News of the World, you know. Anyway, that was what they fancied. So I went down to the Cuttings Library, which was, hard copies of previous newspaper reports. Yeah. Found somebody with a very unusual name, the girl who'd been born into the Children of God sex cult in South Wales. But I found her, I interviewed her, did a double-page spread. We paid her 250 quid for her story. And then the next week they said to me, great story, well done, Neil. Now go and infiltrate it. And I thought, well, I wouldn't mind all the sex, but I'd have to live in Swansea for 6 months. So actually that kind of predicated my departure from the News of the World. I was a square peg in a round hole there.
I think that's a valid response to Swansea as well, personally.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a bit of Swansea. I was born there.
Oh, really?
No, so there is something wrong with it.
I was born in Cardiff. What am I on about?
Oh,
quite different.
You're not very... Okay, whatever. What mark did I give you in Video News Days?
A first, may I add?
We might have to revise that.
Well, after that interesting story, let's go back to your time at ITV and BBC. And you had several other roles as well, such as sports producer. I mean, what was it like for you? And were you quite nervous going into that role, or did you feel ready?
That was at ITV News. That was so I had been at Grandstand, Sunday Grandstand at Television Centre, and that was coming to an end. So I was on attachment from the regional newsroom in Kent, and I was going back to my previous job, and I didn't want to go back. You know, I'd really enjoyed working on Grandstand, Sunday Grandstand, and doing the live sports coverage, writing the news bulletins, working with people like Hazel Irvine. And then I thought, I can't go back. I don't want to go back into a regional newsroom. So I got a job at ITV News, where I became the sports producer. But it also meant I was reporting. So I reported live into ITV News at 10 a few times, and on lunchtime and evening news. I did a lot of packaging of football matches, cricket matches, Formula One races, you name it. And I met a lot of really, really interesting people. Did pieces with David Beckham and Johnny Wilkinson and others. So I loved it. Was I nervous? I suppose anytime you go into a new job or a new environment, you are a bit nervous. I mean, I was never more nervous in my career than on my very first day as a professional journalist when I was at I went to the Liverpool Echo as a graduate trainee. And I was never more nervous than that day. But when you get to a new place, you're friendly with people, you get to know them, you understand the way it works, and within a very sort of short order, you suddenly settle down. So there were certainly times when I was very nervous, when I was, live into news at 10 outside FA headquarters or at Soho Square in London or whatever it was. But at that point, and you guys, you could be broadcasters in the future, you've got to get it out of your mind that you're talking to 4 million people. You've just got to think you're talking to one person. So there were times I was nervous, but it was a fabulous job.
Now, this might have been at the time when you were at the Echo. I don't know, but was there a time you met Ian Rush?
Yeah, I met Ian Rush. He was in his or the end of his second stint at Liverpool, and he lived in a big house, a gated mansion on the Wirral, and somewhere near West Kirby, and I was the Wirral district reporter at the time. So the desk rang me in the morning, said, Ian Rush is leaving Liverpool, can you go and get an interview with him? No one's got an interview with him, go and get one. So I went and I rang the intercom, and he's at the end of his drive, and I said who I was, and I said, can I get an interview with you? And he says, remember, this would be about 8:15 in the morning. And he said, no, not now, you can't, no. And I was like, oh no, because what you don't want to do as a journalist ever is go back to the desk without the story. So I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? He said, I just got to take the kids to school. He said, but I'll be back in half an hour, I'll do it then. And and he was as good as his word. And one thing that I always tell students, as you guys know, I'm a very passionate Everton supporter, but you have to be able to isolate that when you are a professional working journalist. You've got to put your own opinions and thoughts and prejudices aside. And it was a memorable day in my career to get the exclusive interview of him leaving Liverpool.
So that would never happen nowadays, would it, where you can just turn up to outside a player's house? Or be very rare for that to happen?
Yes, it probably would be rare, and clearly the media world has changed a lot since I was first in it, but I always think the principles are the same, and I don't know, I also think you make your own luck, and unless you go to the red carpet events, unless you go to people's houses, managers' houses, unless you put yourself into the place where these people are going to be and doorstep them for on-the-day stories, the person who gets the interview with, I don't know, Donald Trump is the person who asks. You don't ask, you won't get it. So I'm not sure I agree that it's impossible. Perhaps less likely in the social media world because information is disseminated in a different way. But all these things are possible for future journalists, and you guys included.
I mean, sticking with your career, you've worked at Premier League Productions. What were your roles and responsibilities there?
Yeah, I went to Premier League Productions in the summer of 2010, I think it was, 2009 or 2010. And they had just started a 24-hour channel devoted entirely to Premier League coverage for all markets around the world outside the UK and Ireland. And the reason being that TV rights, the value of TV rights had gone up so much around the world that they were now the equivalent of what they were in the home market. And they're currently, I think, about £5 billion over a 3-year period. So they wanted to prop up the value of these rights by offering extra programming. So I went to produce, which meant I was in charge of, as program editor, a 3 times daily half-hour news program. And our presenters were people like Kelly Cates, Ian Payne, Will Perry, Kelly Summers came much later. Olivia Bazaglo was one of our reporters, and so I did that for most of my time there. But I also, towards the latter end of my decade at Premier League Productions, I was the executive producer on that channel called the Content Service, which meant I was accountable to all the broadcasters around the world, and had an eye across all of our programming and what we were doing.
Well, I was just sorry, I know Murray was going to ask a question then, but I've actually done some work with PLP, being like shadowing a cameraman, and you know the big white vans that they've got. Well, the cameraman said, "Can you go take that card to whoever's in the van, and they'll read it in?" I went, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem." He'd only shown me how to do it once, so I got to the van, and the guy wasn't in there. So I thought, I don't know what to do.
So you started pressing a few buttons,
So I thought,
and then the Premier League went off air in out to Mongolia.
I thought, I think I can remember it. So I tried putting it in, and the guy came back in and went, "You completely
idiot.
done it wrong."
Yeah. Oh dear.
But it was fixable. Sorry, I thought I'd try that.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I'll ask you some
Thought we
questions.
could relate.
That's a good story. It's a
Yeah.
good story.
Thank you.
Well, moving on from football, I've heard you've had some close contact with some royals, Neil.
Only one. Well, no, two. I interviewed Princess Anne once. When I was in Liverpool, I interviewed Princess Anne. But I think you're referring to the moment when I came into close quarters with the now King, Prince Charles, as he was then, the Prince of Wales. And I was working Liverpool Daily Post and Echo. The Daily Post had a big readership in Wales. And so I went down to the Royal Welsh Show in Buwith, Wales, where my Everton hero was born. You'll never guess who that is. My Everton hero was born in that town, Buwith, Wales. See if you can guess. Anyway, that's an aside. So I went down there, and I had the Royal Rota, so I was able to follow him around. But we were briefed beforehand. The reporters were briefed, like, you don't initiate conversation, you don't make eye contact, you only speak if you're spoken to.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can go around and speak to the people that he speaks to. So, "Oh, Mrs. Miggins, your sheep won best in show. What did Prince Charles say to you?" "Oh, he said it was a lovely fluffy sheep." And that's what right? Okay, so that was my job that day. But in the kind of melee, in the confusion of like following him around and his entourage, I actually came face to face with him and collided with him. I bumped into him. I physically bumped into the now King. But fresh in my mind was this advice that we had, which was that you mustn't make eye contact with him and you mustn't initiate a conversation. So I just went, I froze, that's not good radio, is it? I just froze. And then he went, "Oh, sorry." And so I just said, "Oh, sorry." So, yeah, I did.
You could talk to
Yeah.
him.
So journalism is an interesting career. You can literally bump into the future monarch. And that's what I did.
Do you feel like an idiot afterwards, or what was it?
Yeah, I did feel like a total idiot, but but I was sort of keen to play by the rules, I certainly didn't want to say, "Oi, future king, get out of my way."
Just shove him out.
Yeah.
Now, Neil, you've worked with, you've done a lot of stuff in your career. There's a common thing going. When you worked at IGN, now
IMG,
not IGN.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people know what that is. So can you just provide a little context of what it is and what you were doing there?
Stands for International Media Group, but nobody sort of refers to it as that. IMG is the biggest independent sports TV producer in Europe. So they Premier League Productions is one of their departments. They also have European Tour Productions, which is golf. They do all the snooker for BBC, the Wimbledon coverage. They put a lot of the darts and snooker on. They have English Football League contract. But when I worked there, I was in the Premier League Productions department. So as when Murray mentioned earlier, what was asked me what my role was there. That was me working for IMG. So IMG was the umbrella company.
Right.
People will know where they're based, of course, because they're at Stockley Park. And Stockley Park being where the VAR operation comes from, and that was developed during my time there. And even though I had quite a senior role at PLP, so I was a kind of senior member of staff, that was off limits to me. I couldn't go into the VAR room and just sort of like have a snoop around and let's just have a look again at why that penalty was not given for Ashley Young, by the way, in the game against Man United. I couldn't actually do that. So IMG was, that was a big part of my career, though. I was there for 10 years. And a lot of people who are on TV and radio now, who are really well known, the Kelly Cateses of this world, and Kelly Summers, and Reshmin Chowdhury's, and lots of people, Lindsay Hooper. I worked with them all there.
You have a good time?
I had a great time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard you were doing some work in Azerbaijan, out of all places, as well, for UEFA.
Yeah.
I mean, Azerbaijan, what was it like there?
That was genuinely. I don't want to repeat myself and talk about all these highlights of my career, but that really was one. So
Yeah.
I'd left IMG and I'd lined up to go and do a lot of freelance work, and the first thing I lined up was to spend a month working at Euro 2020, as it was then. You'll remember the Euros was in 12 countries.
Yeah.
So Euro 2020, spending a month in Azerbaijan doing all the in-stadium TV coverage for the games in Baku. There were 5 of them, including the quarterfinal. And then the pandemic sort of happened, and so the Euros was pushed back a year to 2021. And I thought, oh well, what am I going to do? The Euros have been pushed back a year.
Yeah.
So I ended up going the following year, and it was fantastic. But in the meantime, I had to earn some money.
Yeah.
So I started driving a van for Asda.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'd given up my job at IMG.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started driving a van for Asda just to get some money, and while I was applying for other stuff. And then I started teaching at universities.
Yeah.
So that's when you came...
That was when
Yeah.
not here. I started at a university called Buckinghamshire New University in High Wycombe,
Yeah.
and then I went from there to Coventry,
Yeah. I saw that.
and from Coventry to here. But it was a tricky period, as it was for many people, the
Yeah.
pandemic. And I guess you guys would have been at school, right? Or
it'd have been
perhaps
GCSEs.
not at school.
got out of GCSEs.
Yeah. So that's the same age as my oldest son. But I still got the opportunity to go to Azerbaijan and spent a month there, and it was incredible. And there was plenty of downtime between games, and not a very free society. You know that's the case when you're driving around and you see huge billboards by the side of the motorway with the face of the president on.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a great experience.
It's something different, isn't it? I mean, when else are you going to end up in Azerbaijan? That's the thing.
Baku's an incredible city. I mean, they've got a Formula One Grand Prix. The big football club is Karabag, who play in champions in the Champions League. But it's old Soviet, it's old Arab, and it's a bit like Dubai in that it's got all these new buildings.
Yeah.
So it was a fascinating place to be.
Well, let's move on to, unfortunately, Everton.
Oh yes,
We have to talk a little bit about Everton, as you're an Everton
Yeah.
fan. What do you make of the new stadium? Are you looking forward to it?
Very much so. I went with my younger boy to the test event,
did you?
which was the first game.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the second one, which was this weekend just gone, but the first one, which was a month or so ago. It was an under-18s match against Wigan under-18s.
Yeah.
Typically, Everton lost the game.
Yeah.
But 10,000 fans were allowed in, and it was a great opportunity to see an incredible piece of architecture. It really is a stunning stadium, and I would say that all bias aside. But I remember, and I will always remember this, driving home with Liam, my son, and we drove past Goodison on the way home, and the lights were out at Goodison, and I felt like I'd been unfaithful.
By going to this new stadium.
Yeah, I felt like I'd been unfaithful, and I just thought, how could I have done that to you? I was so sad. There's like this beautiful, shiny, new, younger model, but that's my life partner, So yeah, I'm really excited about the new stadium, but also very, very sad about leaving Goodison Park.
Can we just talk about the player that scored
Yeah, I
the
was
goal
just
for
going to
Wigan?
say that.
He was a Liverpool.
Yeah. And
Brilliant.
And he ran up to the fans to show 6 fingers. And we weren't sure whether that was a reference to Liverpool's European Cup or the number of fingers he actually has on one hand. But, he enjoyed his moment. Let's see what he does in his career.
And are you excited about the Fryken group, especially next season?
Yeah, well, they've come in and they've revolutionised the way the club's operating off the field. They have they seemingly have restructured all of our debt. The stadium is paid for. We have a much more professional-looking board, and I think the PSR issues are behind Everton now. Obviously, we were docked points last season. I think they're now behind the club, and it does look like we'll be in the Premier League next season. So hopefully it's a great platform to go on. Everton fans are nothing if not realistic. Of course, they want to be in Europe or in the higher part of the table, but they will accept a club that's moving in the right direction, playing attacking, exciting football, trying to get there season by season. They will accept that, and hopefully the Freakins can deliver it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously David Moyes has done a great job this season. Are you happy that he's the man kind of overseeing this transition into the new stadium?
Yes, I really am, and I think we're now at time of recording, we're 9 matches unbeaten. Our next 2 games are Liverpool away and then Arsenal at home, so that may well change soon. But he has matched Sean Dyche's points tally in 10 games because he lost the first game and then he's gone 9 unbeaten. So I think Dyche got 17 points from 19 games, and I think Moyes has got 17 from the subsequent 10, and that tells you everything you need to know. He's the right guy at the right time. He was at the club for 11 years in his first stint. Whether he's going to stay there for 11 years this time, as he said himself, he probably won't. But for the next 3 or 4 years, I think he's the right guy.
For Everton, Neil, it was almost as if when Carlo Ancelotti left, that was the sort of downfall, really, because he did such a good job with Everton, didn't he? How do you feel the managers have coped since him leaving?
Well, we had such a turnover. Farhad Moshiri was the owner, and we had such a turnover of managers. Ancelotti, Marco Silva, obviously Roberto Martinez was the first one who got the sack by Moshiri. Koeman, as you mentioned, Rafa Benitez, who was... I'm not being silly about it because I know that he obviously was a very established and esteemed manager with a really rich pedigree. He won the European Cup, he won the Champions League with Liverpool, as they like to remind us. But he was clearly the wrong appointment. It'd be like Reading appointing the Swindon Town manager.
That's why I'll take anyone in the dugout at the moment.
But he was the wrong appointment, and then. Then we had Sean Dyche. Was he Dyche? We've had so many. I don't know if he was the one who was directly after. No, we had Frank Lampard. Frank Lampard, and then Sean Dyche, and these were all just such short-termist appointments. That we need some stability. And as Murray said, I think Moyes, I think he's offering that to us. I'm not going to touch the desk. Yes, I am, just gently. Touch wood.
I mean, going into the summer. See, I look at the Everton squad. And it's funny, when Sean Dyche was the manager, I thought that is an awful squad. And suddenly David Moyes has got these players playing really well, so the squad suddenly looks a little bit better. But what are the areas of improvement you think Everton need to target in terms of positions? Don't just say everything. But where do you think they need to go?
Well, I won't say everything. I think the goalkeeper position is settled. I think we've got a very strong goalkeeper, obviously in Jordan Pickford. I think the back four is largely settled, and I think it's a strong defence. Now, we may well lose Jared Branthwaite, because I could see a big money offer coming in. I mean, like £80 million plus. And I don't think, even under the Freakins, don't think the club would turn that down.
No.
However, the forward positions, the more creative positions, do need addressing. So it's not everything, but it is in the attacking areas of the pitch. Now, we're no different to so many other clubs in that regard. Every club wants a striker, don't they?
Yeah.
But it's interesting what you say about the players under Dyche and the same players now under Moyes and how they look different. And that is purely confidence. Players need... take a striker. A striker needs a goal to boost their confidence. This is exactly what happened with Beto. Beto is not the world's most talented footballer.
No.
Calvert-Lewin struggled for goals, but he's a technically very proficient footballer. He's good in the air, he's good on the ground, he's a good target man, he holds the ball up, he's quick, etc. Beto, we weren't so sure. He runs a little bit like a giraffe. He's a bit all over the place. He can't hold the ball up very well. But he's strong, he's powerful, he's quick. And if you play the ball in front of him, there's a chance he'll score. And this is exactly what's started to happen.
Yeah.
You look at Nottingham Forest, who finished below us last season. They finished below us, and that was despite the how many points did we lose in the end?
It was
8.
8, yeah.
Despite the 8 points we lost in the end, they still finished below us, and I think they lost 2 or 4. So they still finished below us. And Chris Wood, I always knew he was a good player, but I didn't think he was that good a player. But
Yeah.
it shows what a new manager can do with putting confidence into players. So I would expect that Branthwaite might go. But if that happens, I think Jake O'Brien, who's been playing right back, will come in and play at centre defence. Everton might sign somebody like Soufal from West Ham.
Yeah.
You know, they might sign Souček from West Ham. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
I think Moyes will just bolster the squad a bit, but we're always looking for goals.
Was there a story where you got attacked by a professional footballer?
Yeah, in 1996, I was the Tranmere Rovers correspondent for a little while for the Liverpool Echo, and I went on a pre-season tour of Ireland,
Yeah.
and I was drinking with the players. Paul Cook was the captain, and I really liked him, but probably didn't do myself any favours because I kept giving him the Man of the Match award. And Kenny Irons, another Merseyside central midfielder, quite a talented footballer actually. I think he ended up going to Huddersfield. Anyway, late one night in a bar, I was sitting there quite young, 24, 25 years old, you know, with all these professional footballers around me. And Tranmere then, okay, they weren't Premier League, but they were managed by John Aldridge. And they were there or thereabouts in the sort of the upper reaches of the Championship.
Yeah.
You know, they looked like they might actually. They got to the League Cup final and lost to Leicester.
Yeah.
Anyway, Kenny decided that I must be recording their conversation, so he came up to me and he ripped my shirt off me like that. He just ripped it off, and there were like buttons flying everywhere.
What did you have, like, just then were you topless after you did that?
Well, I don't wear a vest.
Well, you might do, I don't know.
So yeah, I didn't have like a string vest on underneath. You know, I don't know what you wear, but yeah, I was topless underneath. And Paul Cook was like, "Oh, that's not on that, Kenny. That's not on that." And I was like, well, "What do I do here?" You know, because I don't want to make an enemy of the players. You know, I got to interview these guys week in, week out, so I just sort of had to suck it up. But thankfully, I did get my shirt paid for by I got a replacement shirt paid for on expenses.
So was he genuinely angry? That's why.
Yeah, but you know, just Kenny, if you're listening, I forgive you.
What? So you just literally saw red?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He said, "He's taping us. He's taping us." Ripped my shirt off me. Yeah.
I don't think you could get away with that nowadays for some reason.
No, I think it's
know.
a different world. It's a
Yeah.
different world now.
Well, one story me and Harvey are quite eager to hear: when you met Paul McCartney.
Ah, yes. Well, he's my hero.
Yes.
It's when I was before I was Tranmere correspondent at the Echo, I was working on the Evertonian magazine. So for 6 months in 1995, I was going to the training ground, Belfield as it was then, every day, interviewing the manager Joe Royle. I interviewed Anders Limpar, Dave Watson, the captain, Andy Hinchcliffe. Some really good players, and Duncan Ferguson had just joined the club, and because Duncan Ferguson had been banned by the Scottish Football Association and subsequently jailed, he decided he just did not like journalists. But I managed to get 2 interviews with him, and they were genuine exclusives that got pinched by the Nationals, I remember. But no matter even though I remember interviewing Terry Venables and sort of some big name footballers around the time, but I never ever got starstruck. And then one day later, 2008, I was working at ITN and I was programme editing the London Tonight, the regional news programme, and there was an opportunity to interview Paul McCartney on this Sunday morning at HMV on Oxford Street in London. And I went down to interview him. I was waiting around, and I remember he'd signed all these autographs, like 300 and odd autographs that morning.
Yeah.
And so the shop were hoping that they'd get his sort of press duties out the way before the store opened, but they had to open the store, and these 2 young girls, about 19 I suppose, 18, 19, came in and they saw this branding Paul McCartney, while all the assembled press were there waiting to interview him, and they were like, Paul McCartney, who's interested in him? And the next thing, this door in the corner just sort of like swings open, and he bursts through and goes, "Right," like that, and these guys went, oh my god, it's him, like they just turned like that immediately.
I'm sure that wasn't you as well.
Oh, that's how I was feeling inside. And then I mean, it's not really great professionalism to get autographs and selfies and things with stars, but this is a Beatle, and I thought, you know what, to hell with that, I'm going to get it. And at the end of the interview, I said, can we get a selfie, and he goes, yeah, of course. And he put his arm round me, and I was like shaking. For the benefit of the tape, shaking. So yeah, that was extraordinary, and I've got the picture on my wall at home.
And you've also got it on your biography. I saw that earlier. On Twitter, you got your biography.
Oh yeah.
There's the picture there, so I got to see
Have
that. I got to see that earlier.
You've been stalking my Twitter.
You've
been stalking my ex.
I was so confused what you meant then when you said biography.
Now,
Yeah.
only because you told us this in lectures. Was there something your dad said to you when you were on, like, reporting on the TV about the whole story with your time?
Oh yeah. So I did a piece to camera, and it was such a memorable moment for me. Obviously, he was my hero. And then I remember calling my dad saying, "Oh, Dad, you'll never guess who I've met." He goes, "Oh, who?" I said, "Paul McCartney." He said, "Have you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "It'll be on the telly later." He said, "Oh, well, watch." So he watched it and then called me up afterwards and said, "Why didn't you sort your collar out?" My collar was all over the shop. Camera operator let me down.
Yeah, he did.
That's the only thing he cared about, just the collar.
Yeah.
Well, let's finish on another interesting story. I've heard you got a little bit of history with a dictator.
Ah, yes. So
Dodgy dealings.
I was working in Bermuda on the Royal Gazette in Bermuda, which is the national newspaper there, and it was August 1998. August 1998. The first Gulf War had happened. The second Gulf War was still 5 years away. So Saddam Hussein was still the president of Iraq, and I was in the office during the August bank holiday in Bermuda. It's when one end of the island plays the other at cricket, and the whole island sort of goes to this cricket match. So it was really, really quiet in the office, and I thought, I'm just going to wander into town. Hamilton's the capital of Bermuda. I thought, I'm just going to wander into town and get a British newspaper. So I got the Mirror and I came back, and I was sort of like leafing through the paper, and it said, Saddam Hussein has banned his people from wearing Bermuda-style shorts. I thought, well, here's a story. I'm in Bermuda. I'll tell this story. So the editor came up to me and said, send him a pair. So I sent him a pair of Bermuda shorts. There was a picture of me on the front page of the paper, posting them to His Excellency Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, I woke up. My alarm woke me up the Monday morning or something, and it was a talk show, and it was, who is this expat reporter who has put Bermuda in the firing line of Saddam Hussein's Scud missiles? And there was a national debate about whether Bermuda was potentially a war target because I'd sent him a pair of Bermuda shorts.
So Neil's nearly caused a war. That's good to know.
However, the obvious question, which you haven't asked me, Harvey, is...
Yeah. Go on, tell me.
Or did he wear them? But I don't know. I never got.
I was expecting you to say yes.
I never got a reply.
I was expecting you to say, I got a postcard and there's a photo of him.
Oh, I'd love that. Imagine that.
Yeah, you
If
pinned
you sent
that
me a
up in your house.
selfie.
Oh my, that's brilliant.
I know.
And you
Well, I
didn't
never
cause a
found out.
war either, so
I didn't cause a war.
you didn't cause a war, so it's happy days. Well, Neil, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome, Harvey.
And you've got
And Murray.
Well, you've got a couple of books out as well, don't you? Just talk a little bit about them.
Oh, I can plug my books.
You can plug your books.
Well, I wrote a book called Blues and Beatles, which is about fathers and sons, because my dad gave me my love of Everton and also my Beatlemania, which we've just discussed. And I also wrote an Everton history book called Everton on This Day, which I updated last year. But so much happens at that club, it needs lots of updates, so I'll have to do it again soon. But they're both available on Amazon or in a good bookstore near you.
Do we get one for free?
It depends. If I sell some, then maybe, yeah.
To be fair, I probably wouldn't read the Everton one, but
I don't know if you've ever read a book, have you, Harvey?
there's no need to.
See, that's why I keep quiet, because I don't want to get rinsed.
You know what I thought? That's a good line, that. You just got me. But Neil, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure speaking to you.
You're welcome, lads. And great work with the podcast. It's brilliant.
Thank
well
you.
done.
Thank you.
Thank you.